Despite heavy advertising over the past few weeks from the cashed-up Yes camp, and despite the start of a taxpayer-funded information campaign worth millions, that's little more than a Yes case propaganda, well, support for the constitutionally entrenched voice to the Parliament remains soft. This week's Roy Morgan polling shows that positive support for the voice is below 50% in every state, despite all the moral bullying from the Prime Minister, from business heavies, and from sports bodies eager to curry favour with the governments that fund them. As of this week, 5 months out from a likely referendum, 46% are in favour of the voice, 36% are opposed, and 18% of us are undecided. But as Morgan says, past experience shows that undecided voters are far more likely to end up as no rather than as a yes vote. By insisting on this voice referendum and by rejecting any meaningful bipartisanship, whatever happens, the PM will leave Australia divided. If it gets up, it'll be a blank cheque for who knows what, to subsequently all be worked out by the Green Left majority in the Parliament alongside Aboriginal activists. If it goes down, many Australians will feel diminished and reconciliation will be set back. But that's because this isn't about reconciliation or even recognition. It's about power and division, and at the heart of the problem is a Prime Minister who hasn't been straight with Australians. To the public, he says, this is no big deal, this is just modest change. It's all about just showing respect to Aboriginal people. But to the Indigenous activist class, he says this is about stopping government doing anything important without Indigenous consent. Consent, not advice, consent. And restoring a measure of the sovereignty unjustly taken away, they say, from 1788. But as the polls show, more and more voters are coming to see this as a sneak attack on the Constitution. And just the other day, the Prime Minister so forgot himself as to admit that this change is much bigger than he's previously let on. As Dennis Shanahan points out in The Australian today, the PM has religiously insisted that the voice is nothing to worry about. Here is the PM in January, then again a few weeks later, and once more again in March.
It's actually a very conservative proposal.
It is a generous, modest and gracious offer.
This is a modest request.
Lots of modest, that's up until now. But here he is pitching to an Aboriginal class, a room full of activists, earlier in the week, delivering the Lowitja O'Donoghue oration. Have a listen.
So let us not content ourselves with modest change. Let us not fill our hearts with the empty warmth of the merely symbolic.
Now, what he said there bears repeating. Let us not content ourselves, says the Prime Minister, with modest change. Let's not content ourselves with modest change. Let us not fill our hearts with the empty warmth of the merely symbolic, he says. This was the same speech where he accused voice opponents of being chicken littles, only then to justify their concerns by admitting the voice is no minor matter. Now, this is starting to look like another slow-motion train wreck of the government's own making. Because it's not about the constitutional recognition of Aboriginal people that just about all of us can support. It's about changing our system of government to give 4% of the population a special say over decisions for all of us. Now, I expect the PM will now revert to the usual deception about this being a modest change. But his own words this week, and I'd be using them again and again in an ad if I was the no camp, well, that gives lie to everything.